least the 60s, and yet there was no dialogue between that community and, say, the Cambodian refugee community in San Francisco, and even less so amongst the trans community amongst the Cambodians in San Francisco. And I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, why? Why do we have this silence? Why don't we have this discussion? And so I decided that this is going to be one of the major themes of this book, Tiger Girl. And so I began to do some research, and there is absolutely no research on this in America, which is shocking to me as well. And even about how, I don't know if you're familiar with the Khmer Rouge, they were a genocidal regime that took over the government of Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. They managed to kill off the entire educated population that they could find. They killed basically 1 in 7 people, and it devastated Cambodian culture. They also led a very gendered campaign in Cambodia, and they divided people by their binary in camps for women and camps for men. What happens then to transgender individuals? There's never been an academic study, and this is in a society where you could be openly trans. So I began to think, and then also we think about our refugee camps that were run by the Red Cross and other agencies in Thailand, and how they would put people together, like they would recreate families based on a very kind of gender binary notion of how families should be put together, and so they'd put together unmarried women and unmarried men, who might have been widowed or widowers, and then they put children in with them, and then they sent them to America as a family unit, which was a very unstable family unit. And so many children who were adopted in these types of families came to America and were abused horribly, because these weren't, even their real biological family. And so that's the kind of family I'm looking at, people who've survived this and are now trying to find a family they belong to, both biologically and also just the kind that they create in America. So I'm writing about a very different experience from most Americans, and even a difference that even if you know refugee communities, even if you work with like the Cambodian refugee community, even if you are a scholar, because I audited a class from a woman who got her PhD at UCLA and that specifically talked about Southeast Asian studies. And so I could see if there's any new research. There's nothing. There's nothing about how queer people fared under the Khmer Rouge or how they fared in America. And so one of the best things that happened to me after this book came out is I was talking about it with various student groups, etc. But a student wrote to me and said that she's been working with new refugee community in upstate New York. And after reading about this, she realized the curriculum that she was given, to teach refugees had nothing about LGBTQ community, nothing. And so they would teach you how to get a job, how to do your CV, how to Americanize in many ways. Like they were telling Muslim students, female students, don't put on your hijab when you go for a job interview, wait until you get the job, things like that. But they don't give them any vocabulary for navigating their sexuality or demanding their rights to express their sexual orientation. And she said after hearing about this, she made sure to include this in her curriculum. And I thought, well, if that's all it can achieve, then that has achieved a lot. So I was very happy. So that was my project. So now I thought I would open it up to questions from the audience. And you can ask a question for anyone here. And if you don't have questions, I'm going to start asking questions. So I hope you guys have questions. And just raise a hand. And you can ask about, broad things, like you can ask Christopher about, agenting, or how do you, if you're working on a project yourself. We're going to have 2 students reading, and I want to encourage all of you to think about your own writing and your own creative projects and how you could put this to work in your own writing as well. You can be the change we're all looking for.
You have a question?
Have you possibly come across any characters who could be characterized as asexual?
Me?
Or, yes, or...
It's funny that you mentioned that, not as a young adult project, but I'm in the process of selling a memoir right now by a man who was greatly affected by, it's a book called The Inventors, about how 2 men shaped his life. One was his father, who was an inventor, and one was this teacher who drifted into his life when he was in junior high school and had an inappropriate affair with him that was not sexual. But the writer who's living, I mean, I talk to him on a weekly basis, but he has said to me, you know, he's straight, he's married to a woman, he has a daughter with this woman, that if he were to have sex with a man, it would have been this man. And it adds like a level of, I mean, it's what I really liked about the memoir, is that it adds this kind of level of yearning and secrecy and confusion and gender fluidity. So he's not asexual. That didn't answer your question. No, I haven't. But I do like that blurred line.
Well, my question is kind of like, when you say to like a younger generation or like a 12-year-old who are growing up with a social attitude of like homosexuality, LGBT people becoming more accepted socially, when you kind of put that burden on our younger generation when we don't have our publishing credentials and all of that, we look to y'all in my class, you like baby boomers, no offense, to kind of have, you know, y'all have the power in this kind of relationship, so when you guys pass over younger writers, queer writers, that makes it harder for us to be that change. And I'm wondering if, when you take on a heterosexual story like the one you're working on, are you, and I know you don't get many ones, but are there ones that are maybe not good enough that you're not maybe paying more attention to? Like,
Yes, definitely. The story has to be good. It has to be a good book. It has to be good writing. I mean, I'm not going to put my name behind a project that I don't feel is good. So the burden on you is not just to write gay and lesbian and trans issues into your books, but to make them really, really good as well, because it's all about the writing in the end. And I love, I'll pass the mic in a minute, but I love what Mei Li Chai, you know, she kind of subverted the system. She got a second book out of her publisher and she thought, I'm gonna use this platform. And I think that, I don't know if Nina did that purposefully, but you know, it wasn't her first YA book that had a main character that was gay. And I think the responsibility doesn't just lie on your generation. None of us are baby boomers, by the way. So it doesn't just lie on you, it lies on writers that are publishing today to introduce those characters into their next and third and fourth works.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's a lot you can do as a writer to normalize, you know? I mean, I think with, you know, Mei Li and I both have characters in our books that young kids are reading. So, you know, it's doing exactly what you're talking about, throwing characters out there and encouraging that kind of acceptance. And I also think as teachers, what we get to do is nurture the writers who are coming up and coming out and, you know, writing about all different kinds of people and giving them the skills that Christopher's talking about. So I think part of it is not only writing books, but creating an environment within the academy where people are free to write about and discuss whoever they want to.
Along those lines, like, yeah, I know I don't want to like put the entire burden on you. It's like, I mean, we're doing together thing, but like, this past week I had a writer from LA, Felicia Luna Lumuz, who wrote the novel Like Sen, which has the narrator is transgender. And it's a beautiful book, it's extremely well written, has great, you know, literary style, and it's a transgender narrator. And one of the things that I had her Skype visit because I wanted our class to talk with her about like how she chose this narrator and some of the choices she made, because I think we all need to talk about craft in writing. It's not enough just to have a transgender narrator, it has to be well done. And one of the things like the students noticed is that she didn't make that big a deal about him being trans, you know what I mean? It's not about like his transitioning, and that surprised some students. Like there wasn't a lot of anatomical discussion. And someone asked her about that and she said, well, I don't want to, you know, like self-exoticize, I don't want to exoticize him, you know, why would he do that as a thing? And so I think that's also something that we can do in our classes, is that we talk about these subjects and we talk about the craft and the writing of them, you know, because there are certain things that have been done, you don't need to do them, thank God, right? Now you can write about the next part of that. Okay, another question?
I think this comes up a lot with like
like students and young writers that aren't LGBT, and they say things like, "Well, I don't have that experience, so I don't know how to write it." So, like, what, as teachers of writing, would you say to those people?
I'll just- Nobody ever really wielded a lightsaber. You know, and that comes up a lot where people will then say, well, you don't have this personal experience, you can't write about it, but good writers do that all the time. You know, I mean, I think just as a teacher, good characters are good characters, and I think that's one of the reasons why no one ever put Geography Club down, because there were so many different things going on in it that were good. You know, and I never have heard anybody challenge somebody who's LGBTQ and ask them how they can write a straight character, or ask a man how you can write a female character.
And
People challenge it, yeah.
being a librarian, I have to interject that this is where research comes in, and writing without research is usually very flat. And people who do a lot of research, you can really tell, and that's all you need to do. Talk to people, you know, and interview people, whatever you need to do to find out what that experience is.
I don't mean to be antagonistic. I'm an English major, so that's why I'm like this. My question is, there are some truly egregious writing being published nowadays. I mean, I don't want to blame Twilight, but I will go ahead and do it. Is this not a case of minorities having to be twice as good, essentially? Or is it truly that queer writing is just worse than Twilight, perhaps?
I mean, I don't have an answer to that question. I agree with you.